There are so many things that money can't buy, and one of those things is, ironically, struggle. Money can't buy you struggle, and struggle is a very necessary part of life. Struggle is not only essential, it is a very necessary part of life. And I think it is particularly necessary if you are a man. And I say that only because if you ask a woman, she'll probably tell you struggle is just an inherent part of the female experience. And this is because women menstruate. They have a reproductive lifetime that spans about 40 years. And over the course of her reproductive life, she will lose between 14 and 30 liters of blood over the course of her life just through monthly menstruation alone, let alone childbirth, let alone multiple childbirths. And even after childbirth, a woman will still bleed up to 6 weeks following childbirth. After a miscarriage, even a medical abortion, which is brought on by a pill, which seems like a very humane way of ending or terminating pregnancy, even then a woman will still have to bleed for up to 6 weeks, and that comes out of her body. So a woman's biological makeup has suffering built into it. For men, struggle, hardship, suffering, pain, those things are just as essential, just as necessary, even when you look at it from a biological standpoint. Muscle growth, tissue growth, all of that is brought on through pain, pain as a catalyst. The breaking of something spurs on things like repair, things like recovery and growth. You only need to look at gym bros, for example, to see how struggle, suffering, pain, those things are so essential to things like the building up of resilience, of strength, of mental endurance, of stamina. All of those things are triggered, those things are like spurred into life when a man or a person seeks out pain, suffering, hardship, adversity, when they set themselves challenges and goals that they expect their physical selves, but also their mental selves to then overcome. And when they overcome them, of course, they come out much stronger on the other side. They come out better for it, because that whole process from pain, like going into the pain cave and coming out of it, that is something that leads to growth. It builds their capacity to endure pain, but pain is not the objective. Pain is the byproduct of transformation. Really, that's what it is. And when I say that money can't buy struggle, look at people who we as a society have labeled entitled. So someone who is entitled is traditionally someone who was born into money, someone whose parents are well off, or someone who has come into money, let's say early in life. Let's say someone like Elon Musk, who is now the richest man in the world. Look at the way he goes out of his way to experience struggle. Because the richest man in the world in 2026, someone who is a trillionaire, singularly a trillionaire in the current world that we live in, he does not need to struggle. He would have struggled enough early on in life to be able to achieve the material success that he can now live off very comfortably, more than comfortably. He could also allow several more people apart from himself to live comfortably without struggle. And yet, what does he do? He sleeps on the floor under his desk in the offices of Tesla, of Twitter, of any building he has worked in. He voluntarily sleeps on the floor of those offices, under his desk, on the couch, as a way of showing solidarity to his employees. That's what he says. But really what it is that you look around and you see ordinary people, in this case, his employees. These are the people who he has to exploitatively employ. Those people are being exploited because for him to earn $1 trillion, they have to earn a whole lot less. And there has to be several thousand of them that earn a lot less than what he does for him to end up the richest man in the world. And so when he looks at them and he expects them to work hard, to give his company their labor, and to do it for much less reward than what he takes home, they suffer for that. They suffer. They have to work hard. They work overtime. They work long hours. They are underpaid. And that is the expectation that he puts on them as their employer. And so he thinks that him also suffering, also sleeping on the floor, working long hours, working hard alongside them, this earns him some kind of respect. He believes, I think, that it earns him some kind of respect, if not from those employees, at least respect that he then has for himself. Because he will tell himself this story that I've earned it. I've earned the right to call myself the founder, the CEO. I've earned the right to be labeled the world's richest man. Because look how hard I work. Look how much I struggle. I have earned that reward by way of suffering. And of course, to the rest of us, it looks completely artificial because it is. It is a manufactured way of feeling like you deserve the success that you have. So when you look at someone like Tom Silvagni, so a 23-year-old kid who has two older brothers, two footy playing older brothers, he's the son and the grandson of AFL footy legends. So Stephen Silvagni is his father, and his grandfather, Sergio Silvagni, also played for Carlton, also known as a kind of Australian Aussie Rules Hall of Famer. So his mother, Tom Silvagni's mother, Jo Silvagni, she's kind of, I think I would say, like a B grade Australian celebrity. So she was on Sale of the Century decades ago. She still does ads, I think, for Chemist Warehouse. She's a known face. She's a very attractive woman. His father also, they are a very attractive family. And when you look at this 23-year-old kid, he had everything going for him. You could say he went to a private school. They've got this beautiful house worth millions in a very nice area, a nice neighborhood. And I can imagine that for someone like him, throughout his life, you would have grown up not just privileged, but entitled. Things are handed to you, doors are opened for you. Ways that other people would have had to struggle, for example, to have any kind of social currency, to be someone in the world. For example, meeting women, dating women, going out, being allowed to go to places, go to clubs, go to VIP lounges, to be able to afford a nice dinner, to go on holiday. All of these things, I imagine for someone like Tom Silvagni, all of those things would have been much, much easier to have access to than it would have been for a normal person his age in, let's say, Victoria or in Australia. He went to a private school, so I imagine that for a lot of his friends, even the friends he grew up with, they would have had a similar upbringing just by way of what their financial means and their financial status would have afforded them. So access to things is something that he wouldn't necessarily have had to struggle for. What stood out most about Tom Silvagni's case is that his parents, from the very beginning, number one, have not allowed him to speak in public, which makes sense. Usually, that would also be the advice given to you by a lawyer. Just, exercise the right to remain silent. Just don't speak publicly, especially not before your sentence. But his parents have spoken to the press, have spoken to media. His father has had a very public breakdown in front of cameras, in front of microphones.
Joe and I, together with our family members and friends, are so disappointed with the outcome. Our son continues to maintain his innocence and we stand firmly behind him. We're very grateful for our ongoing support and our family. Sorry.
I think it was actually received in a very heartfelt way because this is just a father who does not want to see his younger son go to prison. He does not want to see his 23-year-old son serve jail time. But even before that, even before the sentence, they had paid money to have his identity suppressed, even though most people already knew what had happened and who it was about.
The young woman raped by Tom Silvagni says the 23-year-old has ruined her life as she delivered a powerful victim impact statement in the county court this afternoon.
So even though most people knew unofficially that Tom Silvagni was the person in question, who was being referred to in the news as a high-profile man, their family still went out of their way to suppress his identity and to ask whether that suppression order could be extended. And the judge overruled their application for an extension of the suppression order, saying that there was no point anymore since people already knew who he was, especially after the conviction and after he was found guilty. There was sort of no point but also because what they had cited as the reason for the suppression order was his mental health. And because he was already in jail and serving his sentence, what the judge said was that he will be monitored full time by people in custody. So, issues that he may be having around his mental health, meaning that he was at risk of self harm, those things would be taken care of since he was going to be under 24/7 care and protection by the state. What you see though is you see two parents who are really very desperately trying to not let their son take the fall for something that he has done. He pleaded not guilty and he maintained that plea throughout the trial, even after he was convicted. He has appealed the sentence, meaning that he still maintains his innocence. His parents still maintain his innocence. His father said that they would not stop until they have cleared his name.
And in case anyone was wondering, Stephen and Joe Silvagni, they both 100% support their son. They say that he's maintaining his innocence and they believe him. They've also flagged that they may want him to appeal this rape verdict that was handed down last week.
So when the sentence was being handed down, the judge separated those counts of rape into two different things. And he said the first count of rape was actually under deception, meaning he pretended to be someone else. He was posing as the victim's boyfriend or sexual or romantic partner. So that was his mate. So it's his mate's girlfriend. And he did it by tricking her, essentially, by lying to her, by pretending that he was someone else. And this is what the judge termed as rape by deception. And the second count of rape was by overriding her consent. So she had verbally and physically said no. So she had said no, that she didn't want him to touch her, but also she had physically tried to stop him and he overpowered her. But the first count, which is by deception, meaning he lied to her and tried to get her to allow him to touch her by lying, by tricking her. And the deception didn't end there because after the incident, after she had left the house, after this incident took place and she was upset and she was texting her friend from the car saying, guess what just happened? He then doctored an Uber receipt to prove his innocence. And this act of doctoring, what then became evidence in the trial, so he had an Uber receipt and he changed it. He altered the Uber receipt to corroborate his own version of events by trying to tell her that nothing had happened, that he had not touched her, he had not entered the room, it wasn't him, she was just kind of imagining it. And he had evidence to prove this, which was what that Uber receipt was. But the Uber receipt was doctored, which he also admitted to. And he said later that he did it because he didn't want to get in trouble. So this is a very clear act of deception. He very clearly has done the wrong thing because he's being dishonest and he is going out of his way to essentially forge a document to prove his innocence. And that alone says a lot about what someone's capable of and what has been normalized for them. So two young men, two young women, two young couples who were spending time together in his house. There was no need to make that night or that evening any more exciting, any more thrilling, any more sexually adventurous than what had already taken place. There was no need for it. So this push-pull game of trying to get something out of someone who isn't willing to give that up. In this case, consent. So in this case, getting her to allow him to touch her in a sexual way. And even though she didn't allow him, to do it anyway, and then to try to get away with it afterwards through lies and deception and concocting stories and forging evidence. This almost game of deceit is what really traumatized her for a second time, but doesn't seem to me like something that he hasn't done before. And doesn't seem to me like something that he necessarily thinks is bad or that he did out of desperation. It almost seems like it was a game. It almost seems like something that he gets a kick out of or gets a thrill out of. They weren't out on the street, they weren't out at a club, there was no other parties involved, there were no strangers there. That he has created a situation where he now becomes essentially a sexual offender. She now becomes a victim. So someone who was once his friend and his mate's girlfriend has now become a victim, his victim. And he has created such a highly distressing situation for everyone involved. And it's really difficult not to wonder at the lengths that this young, entitled, privileged man, the lengths he will go to seek out struggle, because he has lived a life where he has been shielded from struggle, where he has been shielded from any kind of discomfort or suffering. How is it that a young man who already has a beautiful girlfriend, who already has the house to himself because his parents are on holiday, who is there entertaining his 3 friends, including his girlfriend and his mate and his mate's girlfriend, they're already having a fairly exciting sexually charged night. How is it that this young man needs to go out of his way to create a setting in which he then becomes a sexual offender, and he makes of his friend a victim? He makes a victim out of one of his friends, or at a minimum, his childhood friend's girlfriend. He turns her into a victim by playing this kind of sick game of consent, where actually she's not giving consent, and he's finding multiple ways of trying to get around the idea that she's not consenting to being touched. In every way possible, this is a violation. It's a violation of a code, of a bro code, number one. Number two, of the social relationships that already existed. He had a girlfriend, and that was not his girlfriend. That was his mate's girlfriend. And she didn't want him to touch her. She didn't want it. She said no. And then afterwards, he lied and said he didn't do it, and then got his friend to play along to protect him, not to protect her, to protect him. And this kind of devious behavior, which he has concocted, which he has completely orchestrated in order to get that thrill, to get that sexual thrill. And it really is difficult not to assume that he must have had a life so shielded and protected and cushioned from life's struggles, from life's hardships, and from life's consequences. Because the lengths that he has gone to seek that out in social settings and social situations, which are not problematic for him. They weren't out at a club, they weren't out with strangers. They were in his own home with people who were close to him, who were friends of his. And he's still created this situation where it is not only traumatizing and then becomes a criminal act for the victim, it becomes a highly distressing situation for the girlfriend and also for his childhood friend, who then has to become part of this charade. He has orchestrated, or his parents possibly have orchestrated, a situation where they are all part of the same story that they are trying to hold up, despite the fact that there is evidence that he lied and that he was dishonest in the immediate aftermath of the incident, that he lied about it, and that everyone plays along. And nothing deters them from this course of action. Nothing makes them, at any point, not before the trial, not during the trial, not even now, nothing makes them accept either the truth of the situation or allow him to admit the truth of the situation, or at any point confront the consequences or the reality of a situation in which you do have a victim, in which you have a victim who is reading or saying her witness statement about what she experienced, about what she found difficult, and that they will still say he did nothing wrong. And what it shows you is how much his parents have tried and failed clearly to protect him from the consequences of his actions, but also from the realities of life. When you do the wrong thing, you commit a crime, you are punished for it. And in this case, you go to jail. And they didn't manage to get him out of jail. They didn't manage to shield him from a jail sentence. They actually made it worse for him. The fact that he pled guilty is what led the judge to give him a harsher sentence, a 6-year jail term, because he showed no remorse and no understanding that he had done the wrong thing. And so to teach him that it is in fact wrong and punishable by law, he was given a 6-year jail sentence. And his parents still seem unable to come to terms with that. For someone who didn't need to try so hard if he wanted a sexual thrill with a woman, for someone who had a beautiful girlfriend, for someone who had his own girlfriend there with him that night, who did not need to go and seek out sexual intimacy with someone who was not his girlfriend, where that was a completely unnecessary struggle that he then brought on himself. Maybe jail really isn't the worst thing for someone like that. Jail might actually be a character building experience for someone like this. Because if he has never had to fight or suffer just to take up space in the world, the same way most young people his age, if they aren't from a privileged, affluent background, the way all other 23-year-olds probably have to, he might find his place in prison in a way that he was never able to in the cushioned upbringing that his parents thought would be better for him.